Hello, I'm Phil Svitek, 360 Creative Coach, and welcome to my vlog, where it is my aim to highlight my creative and life journey in order to extract the various lessons that I'm learning along the way, as well as to highlight the various lessons that I teach and how I'm applying them to my life. So last week, if you checked out that episode, I talked about the notion how there was a personal issue that was causing me to not be as creative and so forth, and how I really wanted to resolve that because it meant a lot to me. It was a friendship and so forth, and you can check out that episode for all the sort of finer details. Although I don't go into the gossip and don't give all the various things, but I give the generalizations that reveal a little bit more. Anyway. The point being that I felt it was necessary to kind of follow up because, last week the whole issue wasn't resolved, and even to this day it's not resolved. But I'm in a much better place. The person who I was having the issue with is in a much better place, and we're sort of working through things and understanding that we're going to have patience with each other, especially because we are not necessarily on the same wavelength in terms of a perspective, and we're trying to understand each other's perspectives in that way, and so so we're choosing to honor that friendship, even though it's difficult for us to kind of fully understand the other person's reasoning, if you will, right? But regardless, I think in that realm, if people are open to resolving conflict, there's always a solution to it. One of the things I keep reiterating with the friend is that there's to the person it's black and white. To me, I see two solutions, two options, but I keep saying, if we just continue to explore this, there's a third solution perhaps. But regardless, our friendship means a lot more to us than whatever may be ultimately going on. And so the friendship is worth fighting for, is what I'm trying to say. And I think all relationships, whether romantic or otherwise, it could be with your family, it could be with your friends, again, a partner in business, partner in romance. I think it's less important to be compatible, more important to be able to come to a place of how to handle when conflict and disagreements arise. Because even if you're 99.9% compatible, well, there's that 0.1%, and if you guys don't come to a basis, you don't have the fundamental understanding of how you're going to resolve those things or willing to resolve those things, then it doesn't matter how compatible you are, you're essentially fucked. And so I would encourage people to have less of an emphasis on that, more of an emphasis on, okay, how do we come up with a solution, right? And one of the things that's been evident for me, and I keep reminding myself and seeing over and over, is that even if the other person disagrees, as long as you go into it with kindness, compassion, patience, and so forth, things stand a chance to work out. But if you go in there with anger, with resentment, jealousy, and wanting to just be defensive and prove your point, then you don't stand a chance. It's that's not your main goal. And my main goal is to maintain all of my friendships, that are meaningful in my life, and in this particular instance, this. And so, I think there's a way beyond it, and the other person agrees, and I'm willing to go on that journey to discover what that is. So it's still a work in progress, The funny part is I joked with a couple of my friends. I said, were it not for other people, I would already be enlightened. And that statement in of itself just shows how unenlightened I actually am. Because the point being, of course, if you can't be enlightened around other people, then you're not really enlightened at all, because that's the whole point, is to be able to connect with humanity and not let other people essentially affect you. So I've got a long way to go in that way. And in a sense, as things have certainly calmed down since the onset of this disagreement, and So that's good, but as I said, it's not resolved in that way fully. But you just keep trying, and it almost, things like this, any adversity in life, just kind of showcases to you what you still have to work on. So even though, like, I don't know, I can't say I don't want to necessarily go through things like this, but I am honored, and I do see them as a gift, so that way I can become a better person. So, that's the way I look at it. So going back to the full creative, a large chunk of last week was about continuing the movie. So my first feature film is inching its way to completion. So we have just a little under a third of color correction to do on the movie. I think it looks wonderful. One of the things for me in the past, I think I would have been a little too crazy and overboard with the look of it. And I think for me, part of going into this movie was to just embrace certain imperfections and let them kind of stand out. And, in that way, through the colorization, certain moments that, otherwise might have looked bad or wrong, actually in the context of the film and what we're trying to achieve, actually highlight it and create a magical moment, because it feels, if you've been following along, I love kind of a freneticism to my movie, almost as if like I'm documenting real life, because I come from a documentary background. And so in that sense, cinematography kind of reflects that and so forth. And so now with the color, it kind of highlights that as well. It just adds another layer to it. And what's kind of cool is there's different moods, I'll say, throughout the movie. And one of the things that we've experimented with, my colorist and I, is having different color palettes for the different moods. So it's not consistent throughout. Early on, there's a bluish vibe to it, and then it goes to kind of like a film noir-esque, a little bit of green-ish, not over the top, not like Matrix level, but enough to kind of give it a little bit of a darker, edgier, not grimy, but somewhere along the lines, a noir look, right? And then in the third back half, what we're working on now, we're playing with this idea of kind of an old school classic film look, which is a little bit like golden, kind of maybe slightly oversaturated, just a smidge, and I think it looks good. Again, that the third aspect is what we're still working on, so I have to see it in the full context of it, but just a couple of the screenshots and so forth, I think we're going in the right direction, and it's really cool. Now, the interesting part will be I have yet to see like this movie from start to finish. I mean, I've seen the movie hundreds of times at this point, but never have I actually sat and watched it from start to finish. And it's kind of an interesting concept, which leads me to, concluding the color aspect of it. It'll be interesting to see how all this plays out. I'm going with my gut, and I think it's the right approach. I hope that when I watch it from start to finish, I don't all of a sudden go, oh crap, did I just make a mistake? But because it would be a costly mistake, my colorist, I am paying him, and I want to make sure, if he has to like redo that stuff on, then I would have to pay more, because I wouldn't want, it's not a project based, it's like based on his time and so forth. And, he's doing a wonderful, wonderful job. But if he had to redo everything, like, I don't know, sometimes people who don't know color and how it works, they think, oh, it's easy to change. It's almost like just applying a filter. It's not. It's real science. It's real art. Which is why I get frustrated when people look to editors of like, okay, you can do the color too. Like I can adjust certain things, but in terms of creating a look and a vibe, like again, that's a separate science, and I want to learn it. But right now, I've the past 15 years, 16 years of my life of editing has been focused on the storytelling and the cuts and effects and so forth. But color to me is a different science. And again, I'm excited to learn, but it has not been the focus of my studies in the past. going back to the notion of watching something from start to finish, what's kind of interesting, I've seen the movie a lot of times. I can't say exactly 100 times, but I would venture to say at least like 30 times, but never from start to finish. It's always start stop. But one of the things that happens, there's a phenomenon called Temp Love, which temp stands for temporary. And when you are working on a film, you place in rough things, whether it be music, sound effects, color. It could be color. Whatever else, and it could even be graphics, and by you watching it over and over in that form, even though in the back of your mind, like, there's work that needs to be done on this movie, this is not the final product, this is not the final music, because of the familiarity, right? It's almost like a nostalgia factor. You form a love to that, and when all of a sudden, so Cody Schramm is my composer on this, and he's wonderful, and he sends me these scores, and I listen to them without any context. I'm like, oh, this is wonderful, this is so amazing, and it is. And then you put it in the movie, and you have to kind of check yourself, because you're like, ooh, that's not as good as, and you're like, oh, no, he's making good score. It's just not the score that I'm used to for this particular moment. It's a freaky phenomenon. And I don't know necessarily how to combat it, other than the fact that you have to keep reminding yourself of, like, what was there, is, that was a temporary score. Like, for me, I, pulled songs from movies that I loved, and songs that are like hits and so forth. So I was already familiar with the songs, then put it in the context of my movie. I'm like, oh, this is fantastic, right? But it's always interesting. Like, Cody is someone I've worked on multiple projects, and whenever I there's a short film that I did in college, and whenever I revisit it, I watch it now and I listen to the score, and I'm like, it really moves me. It almost makes me cry. And I also remember the feeling at the time. I was like, I know this is good, but it just something feels off about it. It's not as amazing as what once was with the temp score. And that is what I have to keep reminding myself of, like, this movie deserves its own chance. Like, it's not, we're inspired by these things, but it's not derivative of those things. And so the same way I was inspired by Chungking Express to make this movie, the goal for Cody is to express himself artistically, and not to, just recycle what someone else has already made. And I think that's absolutely wonderful and fantastic. Again, it's a phenomenon. Like, I recognize this, and I really love his score. That's why I love working with him. He's not only a great composer, he's someone easy to work with. We vibe. We have a friendship, although I don't get to see him as much as I'd like to, which is unfortunate. But nonetheless, that's not a knock on him or me. It's just a fact of life. But yeah, I know this is a long-winded of saying that, like, you just have to kind of keep that in the forefront and not fall in love with what's there. And but yeah, it's just a weird phenomenon of how little filmmakers actually get to see the ultimate final product. I remember what's his face, Peter Jackson, on the final Lord of the Rings. Elijah Wood asked him, so he was like, how's the movie, and Peter Jackson's like, I don't know. And Elijah Wood looks at him like, what do you mean you don't know? He's like, I haven't seen the movie. What do you mean? And he's like, well, I've seen the movie, but I've never seen the movie. And so it to me, for some reason, that story's always resonated of, like, you go to the premiere, you're the director, you go to the premiere of, like, a big blockbuster such as that, and you haven't seen the movie. So you're seeing it for the first time. And all in all, that's something I'm looking forward to kind of essentially experiencing myself. And to that point, one of the things, when you're working on the budget that way, like, we're not even an indie movie, we're like basically a no budget movie. We've made this movie, now with post-production, now it's gone up to like $3,000, but nonetheless, like, I have a friend who works for Searchlight, and, she talks about how their indie movies are, the lower tier are $9 million. So the point being, we're trying to get a screening going, and there's plenty of options in LA to, like, rent out a theater and so forth, all in all, like, just even, like, keeping it relatively compact, it would be about 30 invitees. And so in that regard, I'm trying to figure out where to have the movie. And, I don't, worst case, I could have it in my apartment and get like 2 giant TVs that I buy and then later return, put them on TV stands, and we all kind of just huddle around and things like that. And, that to me would be fine. I think everyone would be fine with that. But ultimately, I would love to like kind of do it was meant for the big screen. And so I want to see it in that context for the first time. It would be cool. But we'll see. We're exploring options, and I'll keep you updated on that front because, I think, honoring your work in that way is important, especially like, there's people who have worked on this months ago and, it's not that they've forgotten, but like, their involvement is done with it. And so now it's kind of a chance to months later finally be like, realize and see the fruits of everyone's labor and honor that. So I think that's cool. So another sort of update in terms of the movie. It's interesting, this kind of the state of the world. I was supposed to submit this film already, but my dream, as I've talked about in the past, is to submit it to the Cannes Film Festival, and I have everything kind of ready to go in terms of the application. The only thing that's left is to add a link for the movie. And, I always knew that worst case scenario, we would submit a working copy of the movie. But due to like the coronavirus, essentially they pushed back the deadline. So now, so we have more time to kind of complete it, put our best foot forward. I don't know if we'll fully complete the movie by the time the deadline hits. But nonetheless, it's cool in a sense to have a little bit of extra time to be able to work on it. And so we're going to utilize that. And it'll be cool to like essentially submit a finalized version of the movie. Now it's kind of interesting to think about that. I've stated this before, but my intention will, whether or not I get into the Cannes Film Festival is beside the point. My life's ambition was just to submit. And so that'll be a really cool bucket list victory to check off in that regard. Now, seeing the state of the world, like, who knows? It'll be a very interesting year. Like, we might not even have the Cannes Film Festival. South by Southwest, 6 days before it was supposed to happen, gets canceled. Now, granted, the Cannes Film Festival is in May, towards like the later middle part. It's from like, I think like the 13th to the 22nd. But so it's a while away, so we'll see kind of what happens with the coronavirus and so forth. Regardless, it'll be very interesting to see how it plays out. But that's why, like, I kind of think about that, and I'm like, I'm glad my ambition was to just use the Cannes Film Festival as a driving motivator to make a film, to use it as a deadline to complete the film by, and the dream is to submit it versus like it would be insane. Well, not insane, but it would be such a weird thing, like I guess a mind fuck for lack of a better term, if I put so much stock into one to get into the Cannes Film Festival and then it was canceled. Right? That would just be crazy. And like I don't even know what that would do to me if I had put so much stock in that versus like just wanting to submit. Because if I submit and the festival, let's say best chance scenario in the regard of the movie, I get in, but then the festival gets canceled. Well, that's okay because it is what it is. And I don't know what would happen if they canceled. Like maybe they would move it back later and so forth. Like who knows how it's going to happen, or if I would just have to resubmit for next year, but then would I be eligible because, their rule is it has to have been made within the last 12 months. Technically, that wouldn't be the case. Obviously, that means in large part, I would be putting the movie on ice for an entire year. Not something, certainly at this moment in time, I'm willing to do. Like my goal is to complete it and then just put it out there in whatever form that may be. So yeah, it's just kind of interesting to think about these various things. Also, just looking at the state of the world in general, like the coronavirus is affecting a lot of things. And I'm not saying it's not a thing and shouldn't be taken seriously. But I would also encourage just most everyday people to realize a couple of things. Number one, take precautions, but don't overdo it. Like, you don't have to, worrying that you're going to get the coronavirus 24/7 is not a healthy way to go about life. If you have medication, stock up for, a month's worth of supply, which, by the way, you should have regardless. Have water and, just regular things. I mean, have emergency supplies, which would be no different than just any other day, even without the coronavirus. One of the best preventative things you can do is avoid touching your face and wash your hands. Now, people think by wearing a mask, a surgical mask, that it's going to really help protect them. And it's not that it's not, but I think if you wear the surgical mask over your face, it gives you a false sense of security. And also because of it, it's going to make you touch your face a lot more because you're going to be adjusting it. So for most people, I'm not saying for all people, but for most people, it can actually be kind of counterintuitive. So I would caution you to really think about that and so forth. And, that's sort of my stance on it. And also knowing that for the most part, if you're on the younger side, if you're on the healthier side, you're not really going to be affected by the coronavirus. What's kind of insidious about it is that you won't really see the full symptoms, the full effects, but because of that, you have the potential to spread it to others. So that's the danger of it, not necessarily to yourself. It's more to the ability to affect other people around you. So just these are some of the things that I think about. Hopefully they help you. Going back to kind of the idea of indie movies, my friend Ian Kaiser, he has a movie called St. Francis, which I'll link to in the description, so that way you can check out the website and information on it. But it's an indie movie that he made for certainly less than $500,000. And it's a really wonderful movie. And what's kind of cool about it is, last year they won South by Southwest, and, it's been kind of gaining momentum. Now it's in theaters, and I had a chance to see it at the ArcLight Hollywood, and it was playing there all weekend. And last weekend, it had the best per screen average in the entire country. Like, it's really amazing, and it's really encouraging to know that indie movies, because they don't have a name actor and so forth. So in all the things that you think that you need in today's day and age to have a fighting shot, it's nice to see that that there's still recognition for a truly indie movie, or as I like to define indie movies. And just really seeing it on the big screen at ArcLight, like this is my second time viewing it, but seeing it in a movie theater instead of just a film festival way, it just made me really proud of him. And he's told me a couple of stories of how they made it and their journey and so forth. And like with all films, like they ended up cutting out like 15 minutes of the movie. Like we all end up cutting stuff from the cutting room floor, and some of the stuff that you just kind of grab on the fly that you don't think is going to amount to much, all of a sudden become the magical moments. Like all the things just add up, and the little imperfections create the perfect version of whatever the film is. And one of the things he was telling me, he was like, "Oh, I wish we could have changed this. Not that we're going to, and this and that." I'm like, "Don't. You've captured lightning in a bottle." And it's not to say that he's never going to make another great movie. But in terms of this movie, like, it's already taken on a life of its own. It has a life of its own. It's been birthed. You don't need to touch it. That's what makes it amazing. Like, who knows the domino effect of changing one thing. So, I've just been really reflecting on it, and I think it's important to. What makes me sad is when people don't support their friends. Like, I know. Ian asked me, like, hey, if there's people you think that should be invited to the screening of this movie, let them know. I'll get them tickets and so forth. And I invited all the people that him and I know, and a couple of people, I'm not necessarily going to knock them, but they were like, oh, I'm tired of this or whatever else. And so they chose not to see the movie. And And that's really sad to me because it's not like how many times is this going to happen? I remember having a very similar experience with Parasite. When Parasite, when it first came out, I heard so much great stuff about it. And I was like, okay. I like, historically, movies like this, I'm like, if I don't see this opening weekend, I'm never going to get a chance to see it in the theater, because that's just how sort of life works with these types of movies. It was a foreign movie and blah, blah, blah. And I see it and I was blown away. And then it stays in the theaters and then it continues on and wonderful. But I also would like to give myself credit, because what would have happened if I had the notion that I won't see it this weekend, I'll see it next weekend, it'll be around, not a big deal. Who knows? Maybe I would, by me seeing it, maybe that was a catalyst to create buzz for it. I remember posting that. I mean, I'm not giving myself that much power, but nonetheless, it goes back to kind of like the notion of voting. Your voice does matter, and if you silence yourself, well then, who knows? And I really think about that. I remember the movie Underwater with Kristen Stewart. I really wanted to see that. And but just timing wise, it just didn't work out where I could see it opening weekend. And so I was gonna go see it the second weekend. And man, the screenings for it were limited. And this is Kristen Stewart, and I was like, holy shit. So that was a reminder of, if we can't just, we have to support our friends, and we have to be kind of in the moment. Now, again, I understand life happens and things like that, but I don't know. It just made me upset on behalf of my friend Ian that, friends of his supposedly, it's not like he sees these people every day, and they certainly haven't seen the movie, and so forth. They just didn't come out to support. And so that to me is a shame. It really is, because I know one of my big values is just support your friends. If you, because then it's almost like saying, hey, I want to be a writer, but I don't care to read. It's well, then you don't appreciate the art form. And so how can you be a writer if you don't appreciate the art form? It's I don't know if there's necessarily a point to it other than just kind of me inventing, I guess. So as I complete the film, my first feature, and I'm also nearing the end of my first novel, and just a couple of projects in general, the culmination of a lot of hard work over a year's worth of work, certainly on the novel side. The movie has been less than a year, which has been kind of cool. You start thinking about what's next. And for me, I was like, okay, I can either write a novel, my second novel, or I can do a second feature film. And I had ideas for both, and they were vastly different. And I look at a book, it's a solitary act. I don't have to rely on other people and whatnot. So unlike a movie, you can kind of dedicate 2 hours every day and it adds up, versus with a movie, you kind of truncate a lot of the work into small chunks, and in those moments, it's a lot of hard work. So I was debating, which one do I do? And, the fact of the matter is, I was gravitating towards a movie. My gut was gravitating towards the movie. And it felt like momentum was on my side for a movie. I mean, movie making is what I, it's a big passion of mine. It's what I love and so forth. I love storytelling in all forms, hence why I wrote a novel to begin with. But it's a lot harder for me to be a fiction writer than it is to be a filmmaker, which is, just for me, right? And so, I got to thinking, well, it's not like I'm abandoning writing novels ever, because I can always write a novel in the future. And secondly, if I go through trying to make a movie, right, in my mind right now, I'm thinking this movie I can make for $10,000, which in my world is a huge fucking step up. In the world of filmmaking, that's fucking peanuts. That's wait, you're gonna make a movie for $10,000? How the fuck is that possible? And especially if I pitched you the concept that I pitched my friends, in a way it's like The Prisoner meets The Matrix meets Infinite Jest. You're wait, you're gonna try to do that for 10 grand? But the cool part is, like, I've already proven to myself that I can make a movie essentially without money, without resources, and so forth. So yeah, I feel a lot more confident. And the way I'm approaching this, so I've decided to go with the movie. Now, knowing that I can always return to a novel, and in fact, that was part of my thinking in hedging my bets. It was like, well, if I do the script, and if I get into the early parts of pre-production and, realize that, like, just time-wise, acting-wise, budget-wise, resource-wise, it's just not feasible, or it would be a disservice to the to the movie, then I won't go through with it. But it's not a waste, because then I could essentially just take that script and convert it into a novel. Why not? I know it's not a one-to-one medium, and it would be still work, but it wouldn't be a complete waste. And the idea that I've had for my second novel, well, I have the outline for it, and in the future when I'm ready for it, who knows? Maybe that's a book. That's a book idea that I'm going to convert into a movie. Who knows? We'll see. But that's the cool part about it. And I think a lot of people think, like, when they stop doing something, like, that's it. But it's like, you can always return to something. Like, I'm not advocating for this necessarily, but let's say, like, you quote unquote drop out of college to pursue something. Well, you can always go back to college, right? That's the cool part about, like, life in general. Like, it doesn't, you can always, there's a chance to return. The only, and that's why, like, when people talk, be in the moment and, seize the opportunity, it's all about, really consider the things that you can't return to, like, how many times are you going to get to spend with your friends? If you have a child, how many times are you going to, like, that kid's going to grow up and so forth. So, like, it just basically makes you appreciate the values. But as far as, like, you learning a certain skill, you can return to that any time. So me writing a novel, I can return to that any time. So that's the way I kind of approach it. One of the kind of interesting things, and I'm not advocating for this by any stretch of the imagination, it's more of a self-reflection, is this idea. So it's not like the idea for the movie came out of nowhere. Like, it's ideas that I've been thinking about for a long, long time. But I finally decided, like, if I'm going to go for the movie, let me sit down and let me try to outline this thing. In acts of pure creation, I don't know, there's just a self-doubting voice. I'm sure you might feel that same way. And so, again, this is a terrible way of going about it. I'm working for alternatives, so I don't have to do this. But in order for me to just act from a pure creation standpoint, I drink while working. Now, I don't feel the need to drink while editing. I don't feel the need to, when I'm revising and so forth. It's only in the purest act of creation. Again, so, like, I'm basically creating an outline from scratch, even though I thought about various ideas. Like, this is now time to put pen to paper, and I don't want that self-doubting voice to be like, oh, that's stupid, or like, no. So it's something that I realized about myself. Again, I'm not advocating it. It's not like alcohol, like, I can put it down and things like that. But it's just interesting to me that in moments of pure creation, I just need to shut the voice up, and my only coping mechanism is alcohol in that moment. And yeah, that's that. So, but in realizing that about myself, I'm gonna work for other ways to try to, stay fully creative in a pure sense without the need for that. Anyway, that's kind of overall it. The only other thing that I thought about that's been on my mind, I've been rewatching making of documentaries for movies, whether it's The Matrix Revisited, which tells a story, a 2-hour documentary on how The Matrix was made. I remember, like, the Lord of the Rings extended bonus discs. Like, I bought those not because of the movies. I didn't care for, like, ironically, I didn't care for Lord of the Rings. I'd be happy with the short version. But man, like, the 4-hour making ofs for each of the movies are like, I mean, it must have been even 6-8 hours, like, so much. And that's what always fascinated me. And Robert Rodriguez's, like, 10-minute film schools and so forth. Like, all these documentaries of how movies got made, I was just always so appreciative of, because it was watching my heroes explain their process, and it was essentially like film school for me. And I'm very saddened that in today's day and age, most of that stuff like that are quote unquote bonus on movies are like 5 minutes, and really it's just like a featurette that's promoting the movie of whatever else. It doesn't reveal much. It's just kind of getting the hype up, and it's like I've already seen the movie. You don't need to convince me to go see the movie. I want to know how you made that movie. And I know that's kind of a niche audience, but I know certainly in my world, I know far too many people that viewed it in that way of like it was film school for them, and it's sad to see like that sort of not fully go away. Like people are still doing it, but even like a Marvel movie, you look at that and they're not really revealing how they made stuff. You get little snippets here and there, and ironically, it takes like a YouTuber to really compile all this shit and put something more meaningful out there on how something was made. And so I'm just kind of saddened by that. And I'm working on writing a how-to, or how I made Idol, which is the name of my first feature film. And the intent is for filmmakers to want to read it, and but really like the overarching theme is like, if you're a content creator, don't let a lack of resources, budget, and so forth stop you from making what you want to do. Like, just go out and do it, because it's possible. Like, if I can make a movie for $3,000, regardless of like, regardless of the quality, but I don't mean that in the sense of, I mean quality in terms of how it's received, in terms of the narrative, but in terms of the quality of, it as cinematography, sound design, and so forth. Like, I put it up to most movies in that regard. Maybe that's naive of me. We'll see what the critics ultimately say. But you know what? That's the cool part. Like, I didn't need jack shit from anybody to make this movie. I just needed my friends and a willingness to make a movie, and we fucking did. And that to me is like a pure spirit of fucking creation. I just love that. So I encourage you to do the same. And again, I'm going to document that journey further in the book. We'll see how long that takes me. Anyway, I've yabbered long enough, but this is what's kind of been going on in this past week. So if you have any questions about this or anything, by all means ask away, and I'd be happy to answer, whether in the comments section or on social media at Svitek. And if nothing else, just keep creating, because it's all possible and you can do it. And I hope to see you next time.